and it's anonymous data, but there's also a pretty big industry selling personal data. To me, the most worrying, you can divide it up into government and corporate data. And the government holds a lot of information about us, and corporations hold a lot of information about us. And to me, in both cases, the most worrying thing is incompetence, stupidity. We're told, don't worry, we're looking after you, it's going to be fine, but it's not fine at all. So the government is constantly losing data, and there are forever major security lapses in everything from, your medical records to your tax records to the details of which are held about government's own employees or the army's employees. This information is constantly leaking out to either commercial information organizations or to criminals or to just journalists and the public. So the first thing is that governments and companies cannot be relied upon to safeguard our data. There's a very well-known case in Europe of a woman who was divorced, and she wanted to hide her new address from her husband, but he rang her insurance company and was given it. So there's just nothing like enough safeguards, and the companies themselves lobby vigorously against these safeguards being put in place because they say it would increase their costs. But what I find most disappointing at the moment is we don't seem to be entering the time of huge skepticism against the corporates. It wouldn't be true to say we've forgotten about the bankers and their bonuses, but we don't seem to be doing anything about it.
Yeah.
And that really upsets me, and I think that's driving a lot of people off grid because they just have lost faith in the ability of the system to look after them. And so, for example, when it comes to lobbying from power companies about information or about the price of energy, they just seem to get away with it time after time, and they are allowed to keep their profits when in fact it would be perfectly possible to say, well, sorry, but until you've done the job you need to do with your public utility that you own, until you're providing energy at an affordable price and safeguarding our information, you can just go without profits, mate.
That's right.
But nobody seems to be able to screw up the courage to confront these corporations.
That's right, and even though there are internal reports coming out on, for instance, the issue of CCTV cameras over in the UK. A recent report claimed that actually it doesn't solve crime, and that was a warning that came from the head of the Visual Images Identifications and Detections Office at the New Scotland Yard not that long ago. And although people from within the system are saying that it doesn't really help, I wonder where's the question about, well, what do we have it for then? What's the purpose for it? But that doesn't seem to be happening. Why do you think that is, Nick?
Well, CCTV cameras were kind of set up without any kind of massive plan. And the reason it's happening, if you want the factual answer is because cameras don't stop crime, they move crime to places where there are no cameras.
That's right.
And so maybe somebody thought, well, listen, if we have millions of cameras, there'll be nowhere for the criminals to go. But of course that ain't true, because you'd have to have 10 times or 100 times the number of cameras to cover absolutely everywhere. And then we really would be living in the world of, of Truman's world, of that Jim Carrey film a few years ago.
Yes.
So the first thing is cameras don't stop crime, they move it. The second thing is that once a crime has been committed, it has to be quite a serious crime before the police are willing to go to the trouble of looking at the cameras, because it's a very time-consuming thing. So when there's a terrorist act, of course, they get all the cameras and they have a vast army of people whose job is just to look at video and try and pick out, try and follow cars or follow individuals through different video cameras. But even when they do decide that the crime is serious enough to warrant getting hold of the video, there's another problem, because all of these cameras are all running on different standards with different kinds of film, and there's no regulations saying that they have to be handed in, and nobody is in charge of licensing them in any way. So they've got another problem, which is that they might go to a particular camera and find it wasn't working that day, or that the film has been overwritten because that was 3 days ago, and they just, keep overwriting it every 24 hours. So the whole thing's a pointless mess. And, in a way, that is our salvation, because the system isn't working terribly efficiently.
Well, that's true, and the question is that I wonder if they're putting that out there as a kind of a problem to bring in the solution, so to speak, later on, because I'm wondering what the extension of this system would be if it's allowed to run its course. We're talking about everything from intelligent buildings, as they call it, RFID tags with data feedback in everything, and with biometrical scans even in the floor plan of the building, so it can sense who it is that's walking on the floor inside the building. I mean, how far do you think they can go in terms of this total surveillance grid that seems to be popping up all around us?
As far as we'll let them is the answer.
Yeah.
And I think, if you want my prediction, I think that there is a major change of attitude coming down the way, but it's not here yet. But what's going to happen, unfortunately, in Europe and America is there's going to continue to be an increase in unemployment. Certainly in Britain and America. I can't be quite so sure about the rest of Europe because I'm not an expert on that. But in Britain, I know that the public sector is going to have to be cut very sharply over the next few months to pay for the huge bank bailout.
Mm.
And there'll be a huge increase in unemployment, and especially in unemployment among recent university graduates, because there's been a vast boom in university going among that age group. And so we're going to end up with a whole generation who can't get work or can't get proper work in a year's time or two. And those people are going to become very anti-corporate. And I look to them as being the generation that might finally kind of provide the popular will to take on the corporations and the information society, because it's not coming from those who have jobs and have houses. They're very happy to just continue to exist in the consumer world.
So, if we talk a little bit about what the purpose ultimately is for all the snooping and things that we're talking about so far, do you think it is to control human beings ultimately, or is it an honest attempt here to kind of keep us safe, so to speak, or is that the guise that they try to bring in the system under? What do you think, Nick?
Well, this kind of gets back to the earlier question about what are the biggest threats from the information society, and I said that the biggest threat was incompetence. And however, there are many other threats, and possibly the second biggest threat is not from the corporations, but it is from government, because we kind of assume that our governments on the whole are going to be largely well disposed towards the citizens. But of course that can change, and it has changed in history. And it's never more likely to change than when there's a major crisis, whether that's caused by climate change and global warming, or whether it's caused by economic collapse and fighting on the streets. And that is when the government's control over our information could suddenly become a real menace. And so, the Facebook generation is very happy to kind of go giving its information out online and doesn't really worry about privacy in the way that the older generations that went through the Second World War and communism and Nazism are much more suspicious about handing out information. And so there could be a shock down the line from government if and when we hit really turbulent times. And then the third and possibly most current risk from information is from the corporations, who are using it to sell to us, to predict our every move, and also, of course, to chase us down when we owe them money. So at the moment, if you have an argument with a company about some product or service that you feel wasn't delivered properly, you have the right to withhold payment, let's say. So you withhold payment, but whereas before